allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'll call the May 1st Select Board meeting to order.
Tom, you hit it.
Yeah, I don't. Can you hear me? Yeah, that's better. I'll call the May 1st Select Board meeting to order. I don't believe that there are any changes to the agenda. Announcements?
Thank you. This meeting is being video and audio recorded. As we know, we have a lot of spring road work going on and upcoming. We've got sidewalk work happening from Coffin Street to Salem Street. That work, I think, has started. We've got some roadway repaving from some sewer projects, and that is all listed on the agenda. A lot of things going on. We also have our 2019 Committee, Board, and Commission vacancies. We have our first public hearing on applications for that on May 22nd. The second public hearing is on June 5th. And appointments are made on June 19th. So if people are interested in any board, committees, or commissions, please check out the town website. There's lots of things to look at there. And lastly, it's not on the agenda, but we do have a pond forum tomorrow, Thursday, May 2nd, from 6 to 8 here in this room. Public is encouraged to attend. That's it.
Okay, we'll move on to public comment. This is the portion of the agenda where you can speak on something that's not otherwise on the agenda.
Great, thank you. Tobias Glidden, 24 Rugged Road. I'm a little under the weather, so I apologize for my very deep voice. I noticed on last week's executive session agenda, the board had an agenda item to litigate potentially against Vineyard Wind, a renewable energy project south of Nantucket. And I wanted to ask if the board had any interest in holding like a public forum to talk to the community about what the board's intentions are and kind of what the policy is in addressing climate change. We have a lot of conversations in the town about coastal resiliency, and it seems very at odds with, at least in my mind, with what a lot of the board members have talked about in the context of climate change, to be litigating against a very beneficial renewable energy project in and around Nantucket. So I just wanted to ask just for some more clarification, because you guys are in executive session, so we don't really know what you're up to. So it'd be great just for the community at large to see what the board's intentions are. Thank you.
Okay.
Do you want me to answer that?
I was sort of looking at you, but
Okay, I can answer, Toby. It's executive session, and it's in some of the issues we are not allowed to speak about right now, but something of that magnitude and that impact is going to influence the island for many years to come. Us making the right decision on this is important for the island for years to come. We didn't feel as though we had the information and the expertise to potentially make the right decision. So we are getting people that do, and we are fully in favor of the projects there, but we are also fully in favor of the town gaining as much benefit as is possible and as is typical and normal. So sometimes people will assume the worst when they see things in executive session, but in fact we are looking at both sides of it, and Toby knows that because he's been on that side of it, and so there's nothing to panic about yet.
And it does tie into the fact that Nantucket's a National Historical Landmark and having the proper mitigation.
I appreciate it.
I think Brooke was up first, and then Carl, you're next.
Hi, Brooke Moore, Vice Chair, Affordable Housing Trust. I wanted to announce publicly that the project we're doing with the Nantucket Data Platform to quantify the supply and demand for affordable housing on Nantucket is going into a survey phase, and it started to be published out on Facebook, and you'll start hearing about it. They have a robust marketing campaign, but I wanted to take the opportunity to encourage everyone to fill it out. The more information we have around the housing that exists and what people are looking for, to inform the implementation plans behind all the funding that we generously received from the voters this year. So I want to encourage everyone to look for the Nantucket Data Platform Housing Survey and please fill it out. Thank you.
Thank you. Carl?
Good evening. It's Carl Borchert, 14 Burnswamp Lane. I just wanted to follow up on Tobias very quickly. I know you have a whole meeting to go through. I've been through a lot of meetings myself. Basically, I would say, why the closed-door meeting? I mean, why don't we get together as a community and have a discussion about this project? I would suggest Saturday, a listening session from the Board of Selectmen and the town manager, maybe in this room from 1 to 3 p.m. Saturday, the 4th of May. Why are we doing all the secrecy? Why can't we discuss this as a community and get it out in the open? This is a hot button issue, obviously, and people are very passionate. One of the things that I try to do as a person who's worked on this for 20 plus years is to understand for the first time maybe that maybe people are just as passionate on the other side of it as I am on one side. And maybe that's the most important thing. Try to listen to people who are just as passionate as me that might be against Vineyard Wind. But I think we should get together in this room and talk about it. And you folks should sit up there and hold a listening session. I really feel that. I've already written 100 letters. My wife wrote an incredible letter a few weeks ago in March. Everybody on the island who knows me knows that I'm a wind energy advocate. So I don't want to take your whole night and talk about this, but just let me suggest that if you can't do it Saturday, maybe in the future, before a record of decision comes out by BOEM, why don't you hold a listening session and get the input from the community? If it's overwhelming me against it, that's one thing. But maybe some of the taxpayers don't want to use their tax dollars, like me, to pay for a lawsuit against Vineyard Wind. I don't want to use my taxpayer money for that. I don't think that's appropriate. It's really not appropriate, in my opinion. So I'm in the minority. As a taxpayer who signs that check every quarter, I don't want that money to go to a lawsuit from the town council's office against Vineyard Wind. I've worked too long and too hard for wind power to save this island. We are going to hear, we had 6 bomb cyclones a year ago, okay? Something's happened out there, and I don't know what it is. I'm not a climate scientist, but something is happening. 6 bomb cyclones. When I worked at the Steamship Authority, we raised the base of the bridge 18 inches because the trucks couldn't get over that bridge onto a freight boat. The sea level rise is real, and storms are real. This island is washing away right now. 6 to 8 to 10 to 12 acres a year are gone. So let's all just take it down a peg or two with the emotional knee-jerk reactions and think about what's happening here. Because Vineyard Wind isn't the only one. There's Statoil's out there, Eversource, and Ørsted. There's there's 735,000 acres out there. The federal government wants to do this. And it's happening all over the world. There's 4,500 offshore turbines in Europe alone. The Chinese are way ahead of us. Europe is way ahead of us. Why are we fighting like children about this? It's ridiculous. So just consider having a listening session as the most powerful board on this island, and listen to the residents of the town, listen to the taxpayers, because we have something to say. We pay the bills, and I'm not gonna tolerate my tax dollars suing Vineyard Wind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carl. I think we can talk about having a public forum.
Just to, I don't know, I don't think we want to get too deep into this because it's not on the agenda, but I don't think there's any talk that the board is suing Vineyard Wind. The wording on the executive session agenda is very specific because that is the wording for the exemption from the open meeting law to be able to talk about things like potential legal strategy surrounding something. So there's that. There have been a number of public hearings, forums already about Vineyard Wind here on the island. In connection with the various regulatory approvals that Vineyard Wind will need. We can certainly ask the energy coordinator to set up some kind of a listening session. I'm sure she would be happy to do that. And any questions that anybody has about the project and where we are with it right now can certainly be directed to her.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Another point, just quick, that I'll make on this is I've been at this 20 plus years. When I was on the FinCom, I was one of the only members that was saying, geez, we should be talking to Cape Wind and deriving benefit from it. And at that point, I would say the town was overwhelmingly against it. I don't feel that the town is there anymore. I feel like you guys have done a good job. I think the tenor has changed, and now the question really is, if we're going to take that, how many 700,000 acres and industrialize them, how much of that can go back to doing resiliency and other things that we need to do here to save the island? And so I think that's the strategy, and those are the issues we're dealing with, which, honestly, there's no one in this room capable of understanding what that is. So that's where we need to get some help. And I think and so I think we're more on your side than not. And so I think that some of the, so we have to be careful, all of us, of some of the rhetoric. I think that we're more on your side than you are led to believe by reading that.
Yeah, I understand that. I don't think it's about sides. I wish it wasn't about sides.
And I don't think right now, I don't think it is. Cape Wind, I would say it kind of was.
Yeah,
it was very difficult on the FinCom to even discuss it.
Sure.
But I think what we're dealing with now is a whole entirely different climate.
But nobody wanted them in Nantucket Sound. Okay, maybe me, after 20 years in the business, maybe I'm going to sit here tonight and say, maybe that was a wrong location. But then they're 15 to 25 miles out. It's so frustrating because you don't want them there either.
Yeah.
But like I say, I don't want to take your whole night. And I need to understand, as a person who's done this for a long time, that people feel very passionately about the National Historic Landmark designation, which is in the Department of Interior. And I respect that. I need to learn that more and more because people are really passionate about it. And I'm obviously very passionate about this. But if we could just all calm down and take a look out there and look at what's happening at the end of Hummock Pond Road and Nantucket Road and out at the Bluff. You folks have a lot on your plate every week. You have to deal with the Sconset Beach Preservation Fund issue. Why is that eroding so much?
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Oh, Rita, did you?
Yeah, and I very quickly wanted to add that this, I think, is very much an opportunity to advocate for ourselves in working with developers and realizing that this will set a precedent for how the federal government deals with places that are impacted by these projects. So, again, it's not an issue of lawsuits. It's how to advocate when you're working with developers and holding them to being responsible developers as well. So,
Thanks. So the long public comment.
Hi, I'm Marina Jube. I'm with the Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to come here tonight and thank all the public safety departments for an amazing 45th annual Daffodil Festival. And that I just want to say that we really couldn't have done it without the cooperation with the police and fire departments, and also thank the DPW for all of their assistance with the new recycling program out in Sconset, and that we're looking forward to working together again next year. That's just it.
Thank you very much.
Hi there, Megan Perry. I just wanted to thank this board for my hat on? Oh, you want my hat off. Thank the board for their appeal of the natural heritage decision to dismiss the town on standing. I know the town didn't win that appeal, and I would hope that this board might further appeal that on standing, because it will help the town later on with future developments. So if the board would consider appealing the appeal decision, that would be wonderful. I know Land Council was successful, and it would be great to have both groups at the table to help fight over development like this. And then I had a second comment. I was looking at the agenda. There's some contract renewals on here, but there aren't figures, like dollar figures with them.
They're extensions.
They're extensions. How do you know what that will cost?
They're existing contracts that are already in place, and they're just being extended because the expiration dates are coming up.
So it doesn't cost any more to extend the contract?
Nope.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. Any more public comments? Okay, there's no new business. Approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts.
Move to approve.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Approval of the pending contracts. Are there any other questions or comments?
I just want to mention two things. Of the two contracts that do have a dollar amount, the first one is Finance Department with OpenGov. OpenGov is a vendor that we are already using for some applications on the town website, and this is a budgeting software that we've been looking at, and I think you're really going to like it when we're going to give you a demo of it after we've got it set up and underway. It's going to help vastly, we think, with the development of the town budget and transparency of public wanting to look at it as we move forward through it. And the other one is the next one down. It's for HR, Human Resources, with HR Alternatives. This is the contract that we secured with the Community Compact grant funding that will look at our existing human resources policies and procedures and the evaluation of the town's collective bargaining process. So that was something the board has been talking about for quite a while, and we got this grant a few months ago. Had to get some quotes to obtain a vendor, and so now we're getting ready to move forward, and hopefully we will have a report from the group prior to the next round of collective bargaining starting this fall.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve pending contracts.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, we have one gift acceptance.
I would move to accept with the letter of thanks.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, citizen departmental requests. We have something from the Finance Department.
Good evening. So we're asking today for you to approve the interim loan for the septic management program. At last year's town meeting, we approved a loan of up to $2 million through the revolving fund. The interim loan has 0% interest. The final permanent loan, when they do borrow them, it's at 2% interest. So this is to start the process to allow the Board of Health to start funding some of the approved septic systems in this new round of funding. So this is the first step so that we'll be able to draw against this.
Okay. Everybody understand what we're talking about? Want to make a motion?
Move to approve?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
One quick question. Why does the interim loan note require us to sign that we don't have MGL 40Q tax increment district?
That's a good question. I've never asked that, but I can, and I will report back to you with that.
Yeah, no, it was just interesting. I noticed that, and I know we talked about it out at Richmond, and we saw some issues.
It may have
with
to do with, and it might, and I'll definitely confirm it, but it may have to do with with tax dollars with the amounts being pledged for the business improvement district and how the notes would be. It may impact tax status, but I'll confirm that.
And how that district would be financed, and who would pay it, and
Yes.
if you did this, it would change it.
Right. So, but I'll confirm that too for you. But that's
Okay.
what I would believe it would be related to.
I just thought it was interesting, because I was, yeah, all right.
So, all right. Thank you.
Okay, next up, the Westmore Club. They have a request for a noise bylaw waiver for a week for refrigeration.
Evening.
Hi.
Do you want me to explain, or?
Briefly, I think.
Yeah, so for the last probably 4 or 5 years, the club has had a refrigeration truck in the parking lot for overflow during the busiest week of the season. And last year, one of our neighbors took a picture of the truck, sent it to the licensing board. Amy Baxter came out and looked at it and said, it's fine, but really you should go before the town and ask for a waiver for that period of time to have the truck there for a noise ordinance. The time frame is the Saturday to Saturday. We really only use it for 3 days, but the company that we use can only drop it off Saturday, pick it up Saturday. So we're asking to have a waiver for that period of time for noise. It's not actually the truck is dropped off. It's actually the trailer with the compressor on it, and it cycles on and off, which is no different than the compressors that we have for the regular refrigeration units in the club. So.
Was the neighbor concerned about the noise, or just that it was there, the site of it?
I don't have a good answer for that. It was that there was this truck parked there. They took a picture of it, sent it to Amy, and so she came out, looked at it, said it's fine, but really, to cover all your bases, you really should ask for a waiver.
Okay. Thank you.
We didn't get any letters of opposition or anything. I didn't see in the packet. Okay.
No. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up, Act Natural. And Katie from Town Council is here, and Mike Sullivan is here.
Madam Chairman, while they're all sort of getting ready, thank you, Mike. Just to remind the board, in your packet, there is a cover sheet about this item, and I think it's pretty self-explanatory. We've been working with Act Natural to finalize the host community agreement for their establishment at Spearhead Drive, and I think maybe Town Council could give a quick summary of it and maybe point out some of the policy issues that the board will need to determine.
Good evening, Katie Lockman from KP Law, Town Council's office. In your packet, I believe you received a updated term sheet as well as a red line copy of a host community agreement. As part of the RFQ process in which Act Natural was selected as the entity with which the town would enter into a host community agreement negotiations, there was a template agreement that the board had previously reviewed and approved. Really, the only changes to that agreement have come as a result of the RFQ process, some issues that were raised or additional considerations or offers that were made by the applicant as part of the RFQ process, as well as a few issues that we cleaned up in finalizing the terms of this agreement. The updated term sheet in your packet contains a list of maybe about a dozen issues that I would like to walk through with the board and have them just discuss the reasoning behind these language changes and then seek your approval on these. And if there are further discussions or questions for the applicant, then I suggest that this would be the time to have those discussions. So we'll start with section 2A1, which is the annual community impact fee. The applicant has offered to pay 3% gross sales on the products that are grown and produced there. The change in the language for the board to consider is a reduction in the community impact fee to 1.5% for the wholesale transfer of marijuana and marijuana products off island. This would be a change from the 3%, and this would really only come into play in the event that the federal law changed and there was the ability to transport product off island. As you know, right now that's not legally possible. So that's one change in that paragraph. The second change in that paragraph is that the applicant has requested that there be no community impact fee assessed on any wholesale transfer of marijuana or marijuana products to other Nantucket marijuana establishments in the island. And the reasoning behind that is because this is really sort of a closed economic system with respect to Nantucket. You're already collecting a community impact fee on the retail sales of that product from the establishment that would be transferring. So it would, if you charge 3% on the wholesale transfer and then 3% on the retail at the other end, it would basically be like a 6% tax on any marijuana that was sold between these establishments in the wholesale market. So that's issue number one. I don't know if you want to discuss them as we go or just have me walk through all of them and then come back.
Maybe we should discuss them as we go.
Okay.
Who wants to start with those two questions?
Well, my thought on some of this was, my first question is, how much leeway do we have when we have these terms with the HCA that we decide on now? How much leeway do we have to come back to them in 2 years or 3 years' time with more information and make some adjustments? I feel like the wholesale issue is one that I would like the work group to look at, because I'm not entirely sure what is the best answer, how the community impact fee. I understand the issue and the concern and the double taxation, but I would like some more thought put into how the different pieces fit together.
So certainly with any contract, if there is a request to sort of reopen and revisit the terms, and the parties are both willing to do that, that option is available to the board at any point in time. With respect to this 1% and the off-island transfer, maybe this is an issue that doesn't need to be addressed right now, but in the event that there is a change in the law and it looks like there will be product transported off-island, then that, and you have basically a 3% standing charge on everything, and they want to reduce that because of the change in the law, then that's an opportunity. It's sort of a change in circumstance that would be able to initiate a conversation about revisiting the terms of the agreement. With respect to the wholesale transfer, this is something that the board may want to have language addressing right now, because once these two facilities are up and running, the possibility of that transfer is going to be something that's going to happen sooner rather than later. So that is an issue. If you want to exempt that or not exempt it from the 3%, I would suggest that you consider that as part of the negotiation of this agreement. I will note that the Green Lady Agreement, which the board signed previously, does not address this. And as we discussed, we were making some effort to have both establishments be on equal footing with respect to the terms of these agreements to the greatest extent possible, so that there was not sort of unfair competition there.
And that was going to be my question. How close are these two documents, and what's the ramifications if one of them is, substantially different than the other?
So they are substantially very similar.
Right.
There's a few, as we will discuss, a few suggested word changes that have some minor ramifications. Nothing that I think is particularly substantial, with the exception of a couple of provisions that I will identify. And this is one of them that is substantially different from the Green Lady Agreement. Now, the issue may be whether or not both of these establishments, how much they're producing. So if you have one establishment that is producing significantly more and is in the only establishment in the position to be selling it to that to the other establishment that's allowed on the island, then they're the only ones who are getting that sort of additional wholesale price being charged to their wholesale market, as well as what they're selling retail.
But that would actually be a relatively easy thing to get Green Lady to agree to, because they say, oh, it's not in, we have to pay 3. They would agree to that readily, I would guess.
Yeah, we could always revisit provisions of Green Ladies if they wanted to.
Yeah, if they're provisions that someone would accept, it's easier to agree to revisit it.
Madam Chair, I think if we can go back in a year, once the Cannabis Advisory Committee has looked at this, if we stay at 3, that's fine. But I think we would have to come back and look at it. How it's going to impact things down the road. I don't think we need a wholesale tax. It is a double tax. That cost will be pushed right onto the consumer, and I want the consumer to not, at least for medical, and maybe people who don't have medical who have to go the adult rec route, to be able to afford it. So if we go 3 and 3 and double tax it, it's just going to be pushed onto the consumer. I think that's how it would work, right, Matt? I mean, just basic business idea. So I'm fine with it on island being 0 and potentially being 0 to 3 for going off island down the road. Just my quick thoughts on it. So I'm happy to hear that we can come back and work with the vendors.
Christy? Yeah, I'm in favor of keeping it at 3% until, if there was a change in the federal law or anything that was presented as to why we should decrease it. But I think that's what the board had agreed upon in the original HCA, and that's kind of how we should keep it in the first go around.
I have no concerns with the local wholesale being 0, because it will obviously be charged 3% when it's sold at the retail level. I am not in favor of the 1.5%. I'm actually not in favor of anything that promotes export anyway. I don't see why things would be grown here and exported off island. It just seems like it unnecessary burden on Nantucket. But we could revisit that. Might feel differently later, depending on how the laws change.
I have another question for Katie. And I don't know, this would be if you know about some of the other licenses that exist. If there are other licenses in the state where they are growers only, do you know if those licenses have a 3% or a community impact fee?
It really varies from community to community. Some communities have taken a position that growing perhaps has a lesser community impact than a retail location. So some communities have agreed to less than 3% on a cultivation-only establishment. But really, there's a wide range of agreements out there. Some cultivation agreements are based on, how much canopy is being grown, or sometimes when there's a cultivation facility in one community and they're basically providing their own retail establishment in another community, they've agreed to just sort of a flat, presumptively reasonable payment to the town, since there's not a basis for them to calculate what their sale is within that community, because it's all sort of in-house transfer. Mm-hmm. So it really depends on the organization, what they're proposing, what their business plan is, who they're supplying, and what the community feels the impact will be.
Okay. So in theory, if we develop growers' licenses at a later date, cultivators only, we may have some sort of impact fee on that, so that when they sell, they'll be selling business to business. They might have essentially a wholesale impact fee, whereas in this scenario, if we waive the wholesale for Act Natural, they would not. Is that how it could play out as we develop other licenses?
It could potentially play out that way, but if you, yeah.
I think that's my only concern, again, is not quite having all of the information yet. I think there's interest in other growers outside of the 2 facilities that we have, so grower-only licenses, and so we're potentially disadvantaging them if we have a community impact fee on what they're growing and not on Act Natural, or we just essentially are agreeing now to not have community impact fee on growers if we're going to level the playing field. So again, that's my only concern. I understand that you're recommending that we have wording in there tonight, but I think that this is part of the local grown conversation as well, and the cultivator only license.
So Rita, are you okay with 3% if it goes off island and 0 for everybody who wholesales on the island? I'm just trying to figure out what you're...
I think I'm more of, I would almost keep it at 3% now, because we're at least, I believe, about a year away from any wholesale sales anyways. And I think that when we look at this more closely and decide what that grower's impact fee might be, that we reopen, because I would imagine it would potentially benefit all parties, and they'd be more interested in reopening the contract to discuss a lower community impact fee, so that we're not double taxing. So
you want to keep all wholesale on island at 3%?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No change to the original one.
No change to original, with the idea that as we look into the details more, how the pieces fit together, that we could reopen this and decrease. Mm-hmm. And then with the off-island, at this stage, I would absolutely be in agreement with you that I wouldn't see lowering that. But I think that is something that we can address if and when that becomes a consideration.
And it'll be a lot easier to offer to lower it once we understand the impacts than it will be to ask people to go up.
And we lower it for everybody, or we set a rate for everybody once we know who everybody is.
We should probably take a motion on that, because I disagree. I think it should be 0 for any wholesale on the island. If one piece of marijuana goes, regardless of where it's made, when it's sold, we get the 3%. The consumer is going to carry that burden. It's not going to be. So maybe we take a vote on it. Do we need to take votes as we go on little things that go in the?
Probably should.
Yeah.
I think we should.
Okay.
On these, there are a few major points.
So
Want to make a motion?
Is that a motion?
Do you want to make it keep it at 3, or does it matter?
That's fine. I would make a motion to keep both at 3% with the opportunity to revisit after feedback from the work group.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
I'm going to go with the in favor and leave it as it was originally written.
Okay.
For now.
Okay, so the advisory committee will dig into that
Yeah.
this next year.
I think we'll end up changing it, but I'm not ready to. at this point.
It's kind of like a value-added tax. And there's all sorts of infighting between countries and areas on a value-added tax, which is basically taxation at each level as something is going through the process. And then they take taxes back out, so that you either add in what you did or take away what you did, depending on which country. Japan does it backwards. But it's kind of interesting that, we'll be talking about that here, and why they do it is the impacts on the localities or the various countries. And so that, we're talking about it from a lot different, small perspective, but I think those discussions will be really important.
Okay, should we move on to the next point?
Sure. So this is section 5, which is housing for employees. Now, this is an area that was that came up in the context of the RFQ process. This is not something that was initially covered in the Green Lady Agreement, but it was something that applicants were asked to address through their RFQ application. So the language that has been proposed by Act Natural is there for you. It says Act Natural is committed to hiring full-time residents of the town as full-time employees to work at its facility. However, Act Natural shall offer housing to full-time employees as necessary once a vesting period has lapsed. So, looking for your
Are there
input or-
questions on that? Comments?
I just have a question about what the vesting period is.
What does that mean? That was my question.
We haven't fully determined that, but we're thinking like a year or so if someone works there. Obviously, we're going to need housing for this as we move forward, just like any other business out here. We just didn't want it in here to say that we would have housing for anybody. So if we hired someone for the first day and they ended up not being a great employee and they were in a housing situation, I've seen that happen quite a few times in experiences out here. So we just didn't want it specifically in there, but we definitely plan on having housing, and just like any other business, we'll make sure that we do, and we have plans for that right now. So.
Other questions or comments? Does someone want to make a motion on that language? Where are we?
I questioned, is there a similar language in Green Lady on housing, or are we just assuming?
There's not.
There's not.
This issue didn't come up in the context of the negotiation of that agreement. This was something
Right.
that was raised
Right.
the second round of applicants.
The reason I'm asking is I'm not sure it's even necessary. If you don't have housing, you don't have employees. And so it's kind of, anyway, I'm happy with it as written or taking it out. I'll do either.
I agree, Matt. I think they're going to offer if they can, and there's going to be specialized knowledge, maybe potentially, that you can't get here, possibly, right? So you have to go off island. Who knows? I don't think it's not enforceable, but I think it's a good effort. So I think it's fine staying in.
Is that a motion from somebody?
Motion to approve the text.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion, that carries unanimously. Next point.
So the next one is section 6 in the local taxes section. The applicant had requested that language be added, that the company is not precluded from appealing tax assessments made on its property. So section 6 of this agreement really talks about the fact that, that if certain tax exemptions might qualify for that, they would agree to basically pay the reasonable value of tax as assessed. So this language doesn't really take away from that. It just simply says that if they are, it doesn't foreclose them from going through the regular legal process of appealing tax assessments.
And council's fine with this?
I'm fine with that language.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Motion to approve that or keep it in?
Second.
Anything on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any
Okay.
opposed? Motion carries unanimously on that. Section 7.
So section 7, there were a couple of changes to the security and safety section. In the first paragraph, there's language added that in no event will the police department's review of the security measures override the requirements of the CCC. I really think that sort of goes without saying. The CCC is going to override local security based on the state law, but they had requested that language be added. I didn't have an issue with it, so that's part number one. Paragraph 3 in the last sentence of that section 7, there was a request to change a word from suggested to reasonable, so that the sentence would read, the company shall present the diversion plan, this is talking about diversion to minors or to the illegal market, to the police department for its review and feedback, and to the extent required by the police department, work collaboratively to implement any, it said suggested and this said reasonable changes, amendments, or modifications to address local concerns. That was a request of the applicant. Suggested versus reasonable, it does put a degree of discretion in there that somebody could, they could contest the reasonableness of a particular provision, and it wouldn't be overridden by the host community agreement. And that, I believe, is the reason for the request, so that they can challenge something that they feel is not feasible or reasonable. And then the third change in this section had to do with the last paragraph, and there's a change of the word annual requirement to periodic, and this has to do with the inspections. And instead of having an annual inspection requirement, we just said periodic inspections to ensure compliance with local bylaws, rules, and regulations. The issue that was raised by the applicant's counsel had to do with the fact that these facilities are already subject to inspection by the CCC. And there was some concern that the town was seeking to impose more rigorous inspection requirements than might be allowed under state law. So we just clarified this. I have no significant issues with this language. It's something that would be allowed under local law anyway, and this is just clarifying language. So those are the 3 changes in section 7.
With the reasonable, if that was contested or appealed, would that come back to this board to decide what was reasonable?
So if the police department said, we want you to have a diversion plan that includes some provision, and they say, well, we don't think this is reasonable, then yes, I think that potentially could come back to this board for consideration if the police department felt strongly about it and wanted to insist on a particular requirement of their plan.
And then potentially it might end up with the CCC if there was a disagreement.
It wouldn't go to the CCC if there was a disagreement. The diversion plan is not specifically a requirement. It's a requirement of the contract. So if there was a contractual dispute and you wanted to appeal it to court, then that's where it would be headed. I suspect with a provision such as this, you could probably reach a compromise rather than a lawsuit over something like a requirement of a diversion plan.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, so the third one council's fine with, but the first and second, I'd want to make sure that Chief Pittman was okay with, or if he had anything to say at all. Okay. So if he's not standing up here saying no way, then I feel comfortable going forward.
Motion to approve the wording as proposed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, section 8. This is a community impact concern section. The idea behind this section was under the CCC regulations, there's a requirement for these establishments to hold an initial community outreach meeting. We drafted this provision intending that concerns that were raised either through that community outreach meeting by abutters or neighbors, or if in the course of operation of the establishment that the town felt it was getting neighborhood complaints about certain aspects of how the facility was being operated, that there was an avenue for those complaints to be addressed in an ongoing sort of mitigation plan. And what we had initially suggested as language is that this mitigation plan be reviewed and approved annually by the town and incorporated into this agreement by reference and made a part of the agreement as a set forth herein, which would have given it a greater degree of enforceability. The applicant has requested that language be stricken out of a concern that it provides perhaps arbitrary basis for the town to try and shut down their facility over neighborhood complaints. So that was the basis of the contention, and I'm presenting that language to you for your discussion and consideration. Certainly, it is a lessening of the standard that we had originally proposed.
Okay. Questions, comments?
Back to the usual question, does Green Lady have the same language?
Green Lady has the language as originally proposed.
Okay. I would keep it the same.
Yeah, when I read taking out that the select board would review and approve annually, and that was stricken out, I kind of felt that this is the board that should hear and help resolve any mitigation. So I didn't like that being taken out.
Yeah, and I think if it's in the Green Lady, this is one at this point not to necessarily lessen this. And again, it gives us the opportunity to see how this plays out and in what role we need to play. So I would be in favor of keeping the original language.
Is there a motion?
Motion to reject the changes and keep the original language.
All those, is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion on that carries unanimously.
Okay. All right. We're getting there. So the next is section 10. This is their energy and environmental requirements. And the language that was original to the agreement required that within 6 months of the CCC coming out with their environmental and energy best practices recommendations, that they comply with those terms within that set period. They've requested a greater degree of flexibility that within 6 months or such reasonable time as the company and the town may agree upon thereafter. I don't think this language is unreasonable because there may be certain requirements that are difficult to comply with within 6 months, but it allows for there to be a discussion and an agreement as to what the reasonable time frame is. I will say I believe that the CCC just this week released their best practices, and they had a working group. I haven't had a chance to review them yet, but it may be that as they're building the facility, this can even be taken into account because they have now been released, whereas when we did the original Green Lady agreement, that was still a working group without any recommendations.
Okay. Thoughts, questions, comments?
Make a motion to approve the changes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
Okay. The next two you may want to consider together. They have to do with the deletion of the term hand watering in section 11 and section 12. The other language is staying the same, and the reason being simply that Green Lady was proposing a hand watering technique at their facility, and this applicant is proposing to do their watering through a different means. So they've asked that language be stricken. As well, in section 12, that the term "there shall be no wastewater discharged" be changed to "there shall be minimum wastewater discharged." So that one you may want further clarification from the applicant on what their wastewater minimum standard would be. I'm not privy to that information.
Can I ask does Green Lady have a no discharge?
They had proposed the no discharge in their language in the agreement when we asked them for language to address wastewater. So that had been Green Lady's proposed language.
Okay.
That they came up with themselves.
And we received a letter recently from them saying that they have reached that they're reusing all their water and that they're very proud of how it's working for them. So, you may want to talk to them about how they're doing it, because water bills can, no offense, Mark, but water bills can be expensive. So, they're doing a good job of using it efficiently.
I guess I just would ask the applicant to explain a little bit why it wouldn't be no discharge, if it is possible.
The hand watering, I think there's a lot of better techniques right now that are a lot more efficient. So I think when that was originally done, that might have been a popular technique, but we think that the way with these systems that we have, that it's going to be a lot more efficient. We will use very little water, believe it or not, because it's a closed system and it's all recycled. And once the nutrients are in the water, it's just not a ton of water. The reason why we want the minimum discharge is in the course of this year-long discussion, there potentially could be wastewater that's generated. We're not going to generate any on a regular basis, but with extraction and things, if there is discharge, we made a commitment earlier to say that we would pay Clean Harbors to come and take it away. We just didn't want to say none, because if things do come up, technology is changing all the time. We do want to be able to say, we don't want to come back and say, hey, we're going to have some discharge now. We think there'll be very, very little, but we didn't want that to say none, and that's basically why. And this technology is changing so rapidly. We just want to make sure that we have best practices now and moving forward, and some flexibility there.
So there is a commitment, though, that if there is discharge, that Clean Harbors would take care of it?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, we've written that into the RFQ, and it's a part of our business plan for sure.
And we're talking about the cultivation water. We're not talking about cleaning water to clean the facility or anything like that.
I think it was more when that came up, it would be water like that. The water within the facility that would be recycled, I think it ends up coming out clean. So it would be if we had cleaning material or other water that was required by the DPW to dispose of properly, we would have catch tanks and make sure that was all done correctly. So that was the reason for the word.
If they come and take it away, is that even considered discharge? Isn't discharge when it actually goes into our wastewater system?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on that, but we wanted to make sure that as things do come up, that we do everything properly.
My mic's not working, is it?
There you go.
Okay, there we go.
I guess that is an interesting question. And again, it goes back to if Green Lady doesn't, so they have the no discharge in theirs, but I'm wondering if maybe Roberto or David could help us answer what discharge is, if not.
Good evening. In all the plans before, they had agreed to a lot of our requirements. If they're going to be discharging or someone's going to be hauling it somewhere, ultimately Clean Harbors is going to have to discharge it someplace. So they may be taking it to another wastewater facility. Necessarily won't be coming to our facility. So it is a type of discharge, even though it's being hauled away. Mm-hmm. So I don't know where they'd be taking it to, but maybe that could be clarified by the hauler, just where they're taking it, because that community might want to know where it's coming from. So,
Are you concerned about the discharge from a facility like this, or
we had some discussions and everything and reviews, and the only thing I was concerned with was any kind of grease or oils that might come out from the processing equipment when they were cleaning it, if they would be discharged, and they were very precise on their descriptions of how that worked and what water would be reused. And they were going to have a holding tank and everything like that. So I had no concerns with what they were doing. So
okay.
All right. What's the pleasure? Any more questions?
I'm fine with the word changes.
Yeah. At first, I was concerned with taking out the hand watering, but if you're going to use more innovative ways to use less water, then I'm okay striking out that.
Yeah. I'm definitely okay with removing the hand watering. I guess it's the discharge, and I'm just wondering if Green Lady comes back to us to clarify that, if that's something that we'd be okay with changing. So.
Yeah, I'm okay with Section 12 after hearing David Gray. Roberto?
Yeah, I am as well. Does somebody want to make a motion?
Can we hear from Roberto?
Sorry.
I actually took a tour of the Green Lady facility on Friday. What they're using to capture the water is actually basically a dehumidifier, and it drops into a basin that they just recirculate into their thing. When they're talking about discharge or anything like that, it's mostly just the excess water, which would be clean. It would be basically, sorry, Mark, water that's about as clean as the Wannacomet Water Company. Because it's the only thing that they're recapturing is the water that's coming out of the air, which is pure water vapor. So that's the only discharge that they mentioned to me when I was there. Nothing with chemicals. They don't use any chemicals. They don't use any inorganic fertilizer. So that shouldn't be anything to worry about. And everything that they're going to discharge, any sort of water, anything, goes through a resin filter anyway. So it would be basically pH 7 pure water. Distilled water, really, is what it comes down to. So
Thank
pretty
you.
clean.
Sounds good.
Motion to approve the section 1112 request from the applicant.
All those second, someone?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Section 13, this has to do with the odor control closed air system. We had made it a requirement of the facility. They had requested a language change so that the closed air system only be a requirement of the cultivation and processing facility and not of the retail portion, which in my opinion is not an unreasonable request. So unless they're going to have a substantial odor coming from their retail sales.
I'd make a motion to approve the changes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. One more.
So section 14 has to do with the traffic control. As part of the RFQ process, there was discussion of the fact that this would be an appointment-based retail operation. They had initially suggested 30 vehicles or 30 appointments per day, which I know had been discussed with the applicants during the course of that RFQ process. My draft of the my draft of the HC that went to them just borrowed that number from their submissions to the town. They have requested that that number be increased to 90 per day, 90 vehicles per day. Some of the issues that come up with this number is whether or not the vehicle appointments account for all of the appointments. Are they going to track vehicle appointments separately from their appointments that arrive through other means of transportation? How many appointments per day? I don't have answers to those questions, but the language that has come back as a revision is 90 vehicle appointments per day.
Do we know the approximate hours of operation and how long an average appointment is? Is it like 15 minutes?
I think it's a lot less than that at the state level. I think it's closer to 7 minutes. There's a lot of businesses now that are vetting people online and order ahead, so there's a lot of that. So
Okay.
the average visit's a lot. We're going to block off 15 minutes, especially in the beginning, because there's a lot of people who have questions and answers in the beginning, especially on the medical side. But I think as people get more experience to what they're looking for, the times go down drastically.
They'll be coming back to get the same thing.
Right, and they know what they like. So in the hours of operation, I can't remember exactly what they are offhand, but I want to say it was, I don't know, 10 to 8 or something. So we were looking at maybe 10 cars an hour. We are going to give preferential treatment to medical patients, aside from rec, and just to revisit the appointment based. A lot of dispensaries now are using a similar system to a Genius Bar at Apple, where you sign up for your 15-minute block online, and you're not welcome to wait in line until you have that appointment. So we see using that during really busy season, or whenever it's very easy to turn on. And if we don't need it, for winter months, we wouldn't use it. But that's kind of what we're thinking on that. So I think we have a good way to control traffic.
How many parking spaces do you have?
I think we had 14.
14, okay.
12 or 14 off the top of my head.
How many people will you be able to service an hour?
Well, again, that depends on the 15. We're going to allot 15-minute blocks. So it will probably have 5 different people retail. So we'll have the ability to adjust to that. Make sure that our traffic flow is not too much.
So you'll have 5 staff members checking out. Is that for both retail and medical?
So the way it works is you have to come up to the facility. You have to be invited to go into the first door. They call it a man trap. And at the man trap, you have to hand over your credentials. Your credentials are then checked, kind of similar to like a ID scanner at a bar or restaurant. But aside from that, your medical card has to go through. So then it's all tracked. It's with the state and with us of the amount you've bought, how much you've been through, how many times you've been through, and tracked. And once you're approved there, then you can go into the second door into the facility. So that kind of man trap flows the traffic of making sure you're getting people through exactly what you want. So that person is the gatekeeper, will make sure that, it's easy to control flow that way. So as people exit, you'll know, they'll go out a separate way. So should be helpful.
Yeah, on a 10-hour day, they're talking 9 cars an hour, which with 14, depending how many employees you have, if they're allowed to park there, seems, is probably fairly reasonable. If you have 15-minute blocks, you're taking that 9 and a few others, dividing it by, 4? So that doesn't seem unreasonable. 90 seemed high to me originally, but if you put numbers to it, it's not so bad.
What's the pleasure on that?
I'm fine with the motion to approve it at 90.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So I guess there's just a few things. Oh, sorry.
There's one more section that is not on this list because it was anticipated it might have been resolved before I came here this evening, but it hasn't. So I would just draw your attention to section 20, which is the successors and assigns language. One of the things that came out of the RFQ process was this idea of licenses being transferred or sold, and a commitment by this applicant to not engage in a sale or transfer the license for a period of 5 years. We had proposed language suggesting that if that applicant wanted to transfer or assign within the first 5 years, that there be a liquidated damages penalty in the amount of $200,000. The revised agreement that came back to us had suggested just a 2-year limitation on the transfer of a license with a $300,000 liquidated damages clause. This has not yet been resolved, so I'm putting it to the board for their input and for the applicant to discuss his position.
So their suggestion is
2 years,
2 years
300.
with a $300,000.
We had proposed 5 years, 200.
And the 2 years starts from when they get the license from the CCC. And then I also have a question in that paragraph. The first sentence mentions 5 years still, and then it's the second sentence that changes it to the 2 years. Is that as it is saying that they can't transfer for the first 5 years, but if for some reason they have to, or there's extenuating circumstances within 2 years, there's a penalty?
Or it just may be that they didn't change the 5-year term. As it's written now, I would recommend that language match in terms of years.
Okay.
I think I want to hear from what everybody thinks
I'd
here.
like-
'Cause sorry, I just that was a big deal for us. We talked about that for a year of it. The worry of licensing and the next day it's gone, or in 2 years. I'm not sure how I feel about it.
I'd like to see it not 2 years, but I would be okay with 3 with the liquidated damages in there. Because it's still subject to our approval of who the license gets transferred to. And we would still have the ability to say no. I think that 5 years could be prohibitively long if there were some unforeseen circumstance, like one of the principals got really sick or something even worse. You just don't know.
I think our thought process on this originally is when our attorneys saw this, they said there was nothing else like this in the state, and they thought that it should be addressed. Again, we've been at this for 2 years, and we don't know what's going to happen in the near future. There's no other business on island, including the Green Lady, that has anything like this. So in a way, it was, something that we wanted to ask about. We're kind of one presidential tweet away from either full legalization or prohibition again. You really never know what the direction of the way things are going to go. So it just seemed like to be tied to that seemed to be something we wanted to ask about. It seemed a little unreasonable. We don't have plans to sell, but you never know, with what could happen. Again, like with a family incident or whatever. But that's why this wording came up, and it was brought up by our attorneys at that, saying, that does seem like a long time to put in, considering the other business doesn't have that or any other businesses. So that's where this is coming from.
I mean, I do think that the other business didn't have it because we weren't limiting it to 2 at the time.
Sure.
Like we've created an additional value to the license, just to clarify
Sure.
that point for everybody. Thoughts?
I would tend towards, I understand the concern and the unforeseen circumstances. I would tend towards keeping it to 5 with the ability to, I don't know what the wording would be, to, if there are extenuating circumstances, whatever they are, that they come to the board and request us to reconsider. I really don't want to see this taken as part of a portfolio for someone and to flip the license. If something happens dire, whether it's death or bankruptcy or illness, then I think we as a board would be reasonable and consider a transfer. But I think it should come to the board for the transfer, in addition to then deciding who gets the transfer, if there is indeed a transfer.
So the wording that you're talking about is not to be unreasonably withheld.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I believe that we did insert that language in the second sentence, which was not there previously, not to be unreasonably withheld.
Right.
Sorry, it's in the first sentence. So the board, it does come back before the board. There is a requirement that you not unreasonably withhold that transfer. Really, the question is whether or not, it's really about this liquidated damages provision and how long, if you're going to have that provision and for how long it should be in effect. Because the ability is there for them to come to the board and ask for that transfer. It's a question of whether they have to pay you the damages payment as a result of the timing of that.
Yeah, I'm definitely not comfortable lowering it to 2 years, but I'm comfortable with something in between. If it stays at 5, I'm okay with that too.
And the Green Lady doesn't have anything like this?
The other option, which I could suggest, is perhaps that the liquidated damages penalty is a sliding scale based on the number of years they've been in operation. So, if it's within the first year, then it's 500, but it's in the 4th year, then it goes down to 100. You could also impose a sliding scale. That's another option.
So it's more of an incentive when they're doing their numbers to sell or not, or outside of the extenuating circumstances. I'm fine with the 5. It's tough because Green Lady doesn't have any of this. I want to be fair, but we did talk a lot about our concern of it being flipped, and we gave a license to you, not to somebody else in a year or 2.
Not to the Canadian consortium.
Yeah.
So
I'm okay with the 5 and the 300,000, although I'm open to a sliding scale as well. But other than that, I am fine with the 5 and 300,000. I think at the point of sale, that's going to be small change.
Mm-hmm. The sliding scale might be a good compromise.
That's what I was thinking.
And
I think that's a good suggestion.
So if we keep it at 5, if something does happen, one of those circumstances you mentioned, they still can come to the board and try to sell, or try to
Well, the
transfer
board
it.
could always make changes to this by mutual agreement.
Right.
It's not ideal to have to redo this contract a bunch of times,
Yeah.
but this is such a new industry.
are you okay with 5 years and a sliding scale?
Can you just explain the sliding scale would look like?
So right now, the agreement originally proposed was 5 years and $200,000. Sliding scale would basically be if you sold in year 1, then it would be 500. If you sold in year 2, it would be 4. If you sold in year 3, it would be 2. If you sold in year, the liquidated damages penalty would decrease the longer you held the onto the license.
Okay, can I have a motion to that effect if everyone's good
So
with
moved.
That's 5 years with a sliding scale.
that? Yeah, 100 a year.
Yes.
100 per year? Okay. And I will tweak that language and make it fit your intent.
Right.
And making sure that both.
To make sure it goes, up to the 364th day in year 5.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So do we, Mike, are you going to say yes or no to how we voted? Or do you want to go back and confer and we put this on for next week?
I think we're good.
Okay. Can you get up there and say that?
No, we're good. I'm good with that sliding scale. I think it's a good suggestion.
Okay, and you're good with all the other provisions?
Yes.
Okay.
So going from here, town council writes it up, sends it to them. We just approved it, or we will approve the whole thing, and then off we go.
So we should vote on the whole thing.
Right. So, I mean, I guess you have the option to vote subject to town council making the revisions as voted this evening and authorize town manager to sign on behalf of the board, which is, I believe, how we've handled this in the past. Or if you'd like to see the final version, you could put it on for next week and review and vote it then.
No, I think we can see the final version.
Okay.
Yeah, I would
And
make a
have what they
motion
say.
to approve with town council making the voted on changes and authorizing town admin to then execute.
Second?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We do need to, for the medical, do either a letter of non-opposition or a letter of support.
Actually, the letter itself is just called support or non-opposition. That's the full title. So you
Okay.
can just vote a letter of support or non-opposition and in accordance with the template that's
Okay,
provided.
we thought there was a distinction before. Okay, all right.
I think there used to be, but there isn't anymore.
Does someone want to make a motion to that effect?
Make a motion to approve the letter of non-opposition for medical.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So the planning board's a moot point because you're approved. Congratulations.
I just want to say for the record, thank you. This has been a long 1.5-year process, and I know the countless hours you've all put in, and we really appreciate it and look forward to working together and at the will of the town. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie. Good job.
Excuse me 1 second.
And all we have left is budget reports.
I think we got airport up first. This is third quarter fiscal 19 budget reports.
I think my job this evening is going to be very easy, thanks to Brian and his staff. They did a tremendous job on this new report. It's very well put together, concise, and very self-explanatory. I would like to, though, just go briefly through where we are. Year to date, we're about $2 million ahead in our revenues. The expenses are up about $1 million. But in terms of revenue, we've already exceeded the budgeted amount for the year by about $300,000. Expenses are about 74% after 9 months, so that's a good thing. If you take it all the way through and the ins and outs, including our retained earnings, a projected balance is about $2.5 million that we have at the airport. A lot of the swing, if you will, in the expense and revenue is fuel related. But I would like to also note that we're doing extremely well on a number of other, what I call diversifying our revenue sources. And we have about, let's see here, 60,000 in additional airline landing fees. Rental income's up about 255,000. And we have a, I don't want to call it a one-time, but it's a short, we're being reimbursed for a project as the federal government appropriates accordingly, and they're doing it in chunks. So we received about $238,000 from the federal government for reimbursement for a bag belt project. We will probably, if we're lucky, if Washington appropriates it, have maybe 2 more of those installments. So that's why some of the revenue's up as well. But a big chunk of it is the land that we're seeing a good size income from. So I'd be glad to entertain any questions. Like I said, they did a great job with this report.
Yeah, the reports are great.
No questions for me.
Anybody over there?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Water next. Want to comment in Sconset?
I'd like to second what Tom said. Brian and his team, these are great reports. It's a great help for us. It's a lot easier for us to understand it and move forward. We're in a really good spot. The quarter was up a little bit from last year. We're up 3% with water sales, which I still think is pretty good, even though we've added 150 new services since last year. We're only up pumping 3%. So that's a good thing. Revenue is up on the water connection side. We had a customer, the developer on Old South Road, came in recently and purchased a large amount of water services. So that we weren't expecting that. We were told when we formulated this budget that was going to be the next year out, but that's okay. We'll deal with that. Also, that's probably going to continue into the next quarter, just so you guys have a little heads up. We just extended a water main on Green Meadow, so we'll be picking up customers over there. Based on some of the information gathered with Roberto and the Board of Health sampling, the nitrogen levels are pretty high in Green Meadow. Sewer just went in with David, and before they paved the road, those homeowners came to us and expressed an interest in getting safe drinking water, so we moved forward with that, and we're going to gain some connection fees from that. So all in all, though, it was a good month. Expenses, obviously, when we put more and more systems in, to give you an idea, April, there were 22 working days. For 20 of those days, we made connections to the water main, new connections. So every day, there's a new connection. With that, that means our tools and supplies, that has increased in our expenses, but we found ways to offset that through travel. The one employee that travels for us daily no longer flies. They take the boat, and that's saved quite a bit. But all in all, Wannacomit's doing really well and seems to be moving in the right direction.
Questions?
Any questions for Wannacommit? No?
No, thank you.
Sconset is in a similar place. Overall water sales were up so far compared to last year at this time. Expenses in Sconset, the repairs and maintenance was bumped up a lot. It doesn't take a lot to happen in Sconset to change that. We haven't had any, knock on wood, major emergencies in Sconset over the last few years. This year we did have 2 water main breaks, so that's where the 142%, even though it's 7,000, it's 142% increase in expenses came from that. And also with that was what's called water field work, which had to do with some hydrant repair. And those were those expenses came from. But Sconset's still on pace to be okay as well. And we got our first 2 applications for the subdivision going on Candleberry. So that's starting to happen out there. So there'll be a revenue stream for Sconset there with connection fees probably in the next quarter. I don't know what they plan on, how many they plan on doing right away, but that development has started.
One question on payroll, 9% for the quarter, 16% change from last year.
Yeah,
is
we
that
added
an extra body, or is that?
We had a part-time employee that we made full-time admin up front.
Okay. Yeah, but that isn't expected to recur. That's
No.
going to flatten out. And the medical insurance is up 8%, which we all know is an issue. It's a small percent compared to the
right.
Compared to 900, it's a small percent, but it's still
up.
It's still chewing up a fair amount.
Yeah.
Which we all are struggling with.
Yeah. No, we're fully staffed. I don't foresee us adding any bodies soon.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Good evening again, everyone. Everything seems to be on track where we're going. The only thing is, you notice in the first line there, which is not of concern after we found out that the decrease in the revenue number was because of last year at the same time we had a bunch of people pay their privilege fee in full, which has not occurred yet this year. So that's not a number to be concerned with at this time. This is the first time that our expenses have gone up. We're finally fully staffed, until last Friday, we'd lost a guy, so now we're back down one. So that's, once we get the next person in, we're fully staffed, and that shouldn't be changing anytime in the near future. Our maintenance costs were down this year because we actually finally had staff that could do a lot of the repairs in-house, which was a huge difference. So that's been a real big help for us. We have issued the availability of all the sewers and the sewer projects to be able to connect. So those connections are starting to come in. So we should start to see a big increase in sewer permits, especially in the Shimo area. Meadowview, Hussey Farm, those are all now starting to come in. So we should see some changes and some numbers in the next quarter. Probably a significant jump in permits. But other than that, we're right on track where we should be. Again, kudos to Brian and his team. These reports are definitely helpful for everything and make it a lot easier to be able to present to you guys. So other than that, we're on track. So to go where we want to be.
Questions? Comments?
Just a comment. Some of the areas that we are going through, people are, they're struggling. I mean, with these costs, and I think people have to realize that they're only being charged, 10 or 20% of the actual full cost of everything that we're doing. And so even though it's difficult for all of us to pay some of these expenses, a lot of it is being picked up and subsidized by the taxpayers, and it really, we've sort of set it up the best we could.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of strong feelings in people who are having difficulty, which is why we had the $2 million thing earlier tonight. It's why we're, sort of, allowing people to do this over time. I mean, we're trying the best we can to be fair to everybody.
We are, and we know that there's almost 400 connections coming, and we know that it's going to be near impossible for everyone to get them all done at the same time. And we're anticipating probably some extensions of time periods, and the program that Roberto has is great, and that's become a huge tool for a lot of people, which has been very beneficial for everybody. So,
And those loans are all 20 years, correct?
Yeah, so people
So
need
they're
to know
well-
that there
well
is
spread out.
help available.
There is help available, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Guys, committee reports. We could go on and on. It's not even 7:30.
It's not really a committee report, but I received a lot of feedback about the valet parking in town and just kind of wanted to bring it to the board's attention, and maybe we could revisit it before the summer. But one thing that I thought might help mitigate was having a van service from 2 fairgrounds to town to help people park out of town and come back in, and just kind of wanted to throw around that idea and just bring the attention that a lot of people are having trouble with giving up town pier spots for the people who work in town.
Yeah.
I've heard the same thing.
Yeah, I haven't heard anyone excited about that decision. So I think if there are other ways to look at, again, how to mitigate that, I'd be very open to that.
We are so over. The tough part is we are so, we have so few spaces, and the demand is so high, and we haven't got anything else set up now that how we used to do things, it was okay 20 years ago. It's not okay. We added, as Brian said last week, we added 500 vehicles this year. We didn't add 500 parking spaces downtown. We didn't add 100. So, so things are going to have to change because of choices we have, as a community, have made. And so, we can't do things that we used to be able to do. You used to be able to hunt and come to school and put your gun next to the principal's office, and come show up in fatigues. Imagine if you did that now, you'd be in jail. So, we've made choices here that have changed it. So, I got a couple things from the good news from the sidewalk discussions that we had over a bunch of time is it looks like we're going to have some people sign up in historical commission applicants, and hopefully we'll get them in time for our, for when we do that. But that would be good news out of what was sort of a contentious situation. That's number one. Number two is I brought Rita recycling information. And it was in Mass Municipal, had a bunch of stuff about recycling and solid waste and the difficulty that all the various communities in the state have and how they're dealing with it, and but then I've also got it from a restaurant magazine. I get a lot of that junk for work, and they're talking about how one of the guys that's talking about how it's the lack of infrastructure for sort of the compostable stuff is a travesty. You're making people put in place things, and the systems aren't in place to even deal with it yet. And so it's very interesting. It's not just Nantucket that's struggling with this. It's a nationwide problem. It's China no longer taking everything. We can't dump our stuff in China or India anymore, so we have to figure out our own problem. And so I think it's kind of, it's sort of something to think about at our own level of how do we do this long term, and do we continue piling stuff up on the hill when we know the hill's going to be where the water cuts through in 20, 30 years. So anyway, that's a longer conversation. And my only other comment was I was in and out during the strike at Stop and Shop. I wanted to say this last week, but it took too long. I was in and out of the back of a lot of the different stores, and that would be, Meat and Fish and Bartlett's and the Culinary Center, Annie's, et cetera. And I think, people should still consider shopping local with some of these guys, as much as, I do a lot of business in Stop and Shop too. But they should, the island people, Bartlett's and those guys, they really stepped up during that whole period. And I know how much stuff they still have in the back and how much they bought for the island to service us all. And I think people should, be aware of that and shop some of these places occasionally now to help them get their inventories back down. I mean, they really went above and beyond, during that period. And I think, as a community and, as shoppers, people should sort of go above and beyond for the next week or two until the summer kicks in, because when it does, they'll get rid of that stuff. But in the meantime, they really ramped up to service us. So that's all.
Thank you for that reminder. It's true.
I just have 4 short things.
Okay.
First one is bike related. May, you'll be happy to know, it's National Bike Month. And so May 13th to the 19th is National Bike Week. That's very exciting. May 8th is Walk and Bike to School. The school does this every year.
Yes.
And they have so many bikes, they can't even put them anywhere. I mean, they're overflowing. But May 17th is Bike to Work Day. I know not everybody can do that, but there's got to be something in there in the month of May whether it's a Saturday or a Sunday where you can bike to, one trip. I was looking up some stats. 40% of the trips in the United States are less than 2 miles. So there's got to be something. I know not everybody can do it, but half of us can do one trip in the month of May on a bike, not a car. So I encourage everyone to do that. Select board, if you like, in the Bike to Work week, maybe, what is that, like the 15th? Maybe we could bike to the select board meeting. I don't know, just throwing it out there. So there's that. Daffodil. I took a walk up and down out in Sconset, and I was really impressed with the recycling program. And I know it was new, and it was the first year, and some people were confused what goes where, but it was an awesome start. I think I saw everybody where I stopped, everybody was doing it. Almost, it was kind of overflowing. So I thought that was great. I didn't see too much commercial activity out there. That's what I was afraid of. Matt, the Sidewalk group, it is, we met a couple weeks ago with a small group. We're actually meeting tomorrow just to figure out a process to make the process so we can come back here. So that's improving, and we're going to keep adding people in as we go. So I agree, positive things there. And then something just to bring to the board's attention, as we get bigger, things aren't like they used to be, as Matt was saying. There was, someone took a video and sent it to me. There's a new commercial entity on Main Street, and they had a staff member out selling things like, hey, you want to try some of this?
I got the same thing.
Some of this lotion, and then, on town property. And I looked into it. There's no bylaw particularly against that, but it's not really what we do here. So if that keeps growing, that might have to be something that we have to address. You saw it. And
I saw it. I saw the product, and I've seen this other places. I've seen it in like on Rodeo Drive in Los Angeles,
Right.
where they pull people in. It's the same tactic. They set up kiosks in the mall in different places and try and give you samples. So I was kind of surprised to see it on Main Street, but I also noticed another business that we recently did licensing for has some very objectionable temporary signs all over the front of their building.
I checked in, it's being addressed by our licensing. Also, licensing did stop by this particular store that I just mentioned and just had a nice conversation with them.
Yeah, they should stay inside probably.
Did it work
Inside
on
the
you, Dawn?
doors.
Did you get pulled in?
I did get pulled in. Yep. Not here, but I got sucked in
They
Los
hooked you in, I had a
Angeles.
feeling.
That's all I had.
I don't have the exact date and time, but the CPC's annual forum is this month. So I will announce that next week.
Great.
Did I mention it's National Bike Month? I don't know. Did I go over that?
Is there anything else anybody wants to talk about? Okay. Motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.